Hello, Americans. A few people from Washington, D.C., New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and Maine, and bordering countries, and all the countries in the news, they had collusion/S with uses of the Weathersfield judicial branch offices and corrections offices with a human fact should be nature breaching method, with predicate acts methods, plural, tied to a singular method that was entrenched before our founders were born and right through the founding of America. The nature of debates, you guys learn things about, oh, you're supposed to keep that a secret. There's only three branches of government. This breaching method employed them and their kids in the difference of the guilt, right where no one wanted guilt and no one wants guilt. But there are collusions anyway, like black people's right to buy syntax. You have guilt, you guys have delusions too that wouldn't have been there had the Constitution been valued properly. People on a mass scale are just planting evidences, doing insane things, timing it, so then they can bring it before courts that have collusions with themselves, and per other names involved, and per hyperforeign. The suburbs, there are homes and designs of them. The scale, the pathology of everything, so to speak. I'm not a doctor. Doctors, lawyers, the names of the people of the sciences have as evidences collusion/S originally and still. And they get away with it by self-valuing rules with mass fake transcripts. And rules with that were all, our own, or spying on our own to hand up truths to use for lies. And to mix that with complete lies, fake motivations, and sequence shifts, and just fake transcripts. The police are recorded various ways that said we can all discern and we are obligated to. And with the courts planting fake transcripts and ties to people. Many people tied to a police chief, Cintron, have collusion/S with retired police chiefs, and a whole bunch of people at Trinity College were influenced to collusion/S on my street, and with a Joshua Stryker and others tied to the same house/S that the police and the courts brought up with their confessions and their predicate acts. And they're trying to still pretend things should be solved ways where they're lying about what they think about that. Because the courts in the Britain Superior Court, Connecticut's District Court, the Hartford courts, plural, and their family members and their intimate ties, they have predicate acts intercities with the same house. And people tied to them with fake transcripts since I was a kid, and a whole bunch of other countries. And now they're forging and switching names into branch and attach me to fake conversations with WFSB. They are fusing writing so they could use, because they already attached me and everyone around me to fake conversations, changed conversations, fake ties to complete strangers, changed ties to other people. They recorded themselves intercities and intra-cities, intercampuses and intra-campuses, including people that don't even go to the same campuses, planting evidences online. Facebook has a bunch of people involved with all sides of criminal and civil cases, the court's names and the intelligence in their campuses, involved with this intercities, intra-cities, intercampuses, intra-campuses. The same names, the differences of their guilt there, or with the names next to body dumping spots, completely different body dumping spots, completely different reported killers, completely different, convicted killers. People increasingly tied to a Ray Cololo as adults and kids at Trinity College and next to it, involved with predicate acts with a Joshua Stryker. I never saw him in my life. No, it was in my grade. They try to take a picture of me walking by. I never had a word of conversation with a Joshua Stryker. He's involved with the Darth Vader and a whole bunch of people on my street involved in Wethersfield, involved with an untimely death at Trinity College. Even if that was made up, but in other words, they had roles with other natures of organized crime acts and planting letters, faked evidences, crimes, as the people involved with judges and prosecutors with Central Connecticut State University and with houses and businesses next to it, personally and professionally involved with each other, next to Trinity College with a bunch of people, with the houses and businesses in the fire department, increasingly involved with other fire departments and foreign and domestic military leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since. And I didn't know all this. They keep confessing you also when they don't say anything. And this is intercities. And then they pretend you to fake conversations. Increasingly, the judicial branch offices and houses next to it have a whole bunch of federal evidences, crimes, identity thefts, and frauds, falsified police reports roles, and child abusers, leaders of kids, first force roles, and more recorded in the past and more recorded active now. Now that this is also being hid by them faking fake on a mass scale. They fake things, pretend to record it that are not. Wethersfield police recorded themselves, recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming to me that they already attached me to fake conversations and ties to themselves at the police station when I was a kid. It wasn't at all, and as an adult. And when I did get arrested and go to the police station, I had one word of conversation with them. They took my fingerprints and they didn't even ask me anything. And they took me out of a class, an algebra class, involved with a Congressman Larson, and his relatives were told a whole bunch of fake things about me. It has the family members of and as their guilt or as the guilt of a former police guy who was a part of the security with Wethersfield campuses is involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and with his co-defendants and their family members. Many involved with and as Dawn LeConte and her father, John LeConte, and a Thaddeus Grabowski have roles all along Route 3 and conjunctions to it are people that were influenced by investigators to hide how the investigators made them fake things, hide things. They put fake ties, fake nature ties to me. They'll tell you this, but you have to ask them rightly. And I'm sorry for having to speak about people. I can't get the interbranch on paper. Mazzucato Bakery, a whole bunch of people tied to the Wethersfield Police Chief Cintron, and 1 year before him. They have their intimate ties involved with a modern Mazzucato Bakery, and with that corner from years before they were there, with a whole bunch of people from Wethersfield involved at the town lines, covering up live progressions and roles with crime acts and methods. And then, say, oh, I don't know, that's part of the collusion /S. That's also leaking and while pretending other. In other words, because people are obligated by mandated law not to change and fake what people say about world, and not fake conversations about the World Trade Center attack with people that were in the court next to it, and the night before with a hotel and other spots there, right before the World Trade Center attack. From inside the Ninth Circuit Court, they had changed the timing of the date when the papers had been brought to the court and time-stamped on time. And that was proven after the World Trade Center attack. But right before the World Trade Center attack, from inside the court, insidiously, they had been shown the panel of judges post-dated legal papers to make them look as if they had been handed in late. These are also people with insidious roles with the mail and with the nature of it and with the names associated with that, like a Robert Chevalier is increasingly involved with people from East Hartford, and like with the names DeMorrow, Scalora, and Cololo. Cololo and DeMorrow said that's their cousin, Scalora. Wethersfield police have been making confessions about the name Scalora, involved with them forging and switching names. and speaking through others, and they won't get on paper. I told you they attached me to fake being at the police station and speaking with them as a kid, and I was an adult. Then they had to hide live progressions with the news, intercities, and with their sources. WTNH has an O'Neill family and has their kids involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and planting fake motivations because they have a whole bunch of different countries and people from Saudi Arabia involved with them, and some police named Mendez, also with this police chief Cintron, and one's with the name Dylan, and one's with the name Kerr. Also with New Britain Superior Court has a bunch of people involved with the Kerr family with proven child abusers, leaders, and kids years apart. All kinds of planting evidences with people tied to people tied to a former police mayors from Wethersfield, and their and conjunctions to them and their families and intimate ties. Like a Ruth is one of the ones associated with the as a house next to the Department of Education, and her neighbors are involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and the families involved forcing child abusers, leaders, and kids years apart. And the one I caught them with the principal with that same group, and there were more then and now. And I'm only having to refer to them as that because they're playing games with their intelligence families and with everyone. Oh, I'm just repeating with them. They have obligations to not change and fake what I say. I never communicated with the ones named O'Connor. And I don't even know, they're attaching me intercities. They're putting fake things at each campus with names next to the campuses I went to too. Increasingly, a Valley Crest Street in Wethersfield has a DeMoro family and people involved with them with sexual and medical offenders of kids, foreign and domestic, and my educators are involved with planting fake things in databases with the DeMoro family, all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, wire crimes, falsified police reports, roles they have with, also federal crimes with corners of the street all along Route 175 is one of the things they're recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming. Increasingly, whiting forensics too has digital crimes with them. And Facebook has cases involved with all sides of the cases and the courts used as the sense and sensibilities for the breaching method, the hyperforeign that has been replaced right from James Madison's declassified communications. And regarding how and why, he's the only founder that we know the name of. In other words, and how and why they did not have free speech. Nature itself shows us this and showed it. But we have people that refer to evidences as collusion/S and as the only ones allowed to speak for crimes. The names of the people, the sciences, are shown to the people at each age and nature of campus. That when we are kids, we have forgiveness when we know when what we all observed was from off those campuses. There were hyper additional, apparent, and even the real motivations that we recognized and attributed and let people attribute to why how others communicated for nature and what our founders communicated as just the way the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born. And if we pay attention to what was the value of the laws that were entrenched then. See, we have their words with that left out, that which is declassified. And we have all the exceptions and exception nature used to pretend other as styles of natures of debate that are increasingly reliant upon criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw fact, human nature, quality aspects in nature itself as criminal and seditious nature. I am not a lawyer. We're supposed to be able to demonstrate. We're obligated to demonstrate how lawyers, which trials are about. Why there's a witch trials place next to Webb Stevens Museum. It was first called Webb House, with no love before it, which is significant, and then called the Webb Stevens Museum. Now called that. And then and now they still have other communicated for that place. And for our founders, again, the only one we know the name of is James Madison. But also we have other communicated for our presidents and chiefs than our founders and James Madison. And George Washington has to be communicated for himself. We're supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. It was declassified why and how he didn't have free speech. To be honest about it himself. I mean, to go into it, etc. In other words, but he did direct us. That was his motivation. That he was extorted. See, the plan was to force the other countries and the names operating them, which are locations, areas, and states, are the only names that can operate the phenomenon of the names of countries. And they have been systems tactical ulterior from the one that has relativity to our short words, long words, and they're grouped distinctly from the systems that we are forced to entertain syntactically. And we're forced to ignore this. Not just if we are Native American. It's just simply distinctly they have prevented free speech from ourselves. They have prevented principles of law treatments of integrity, while others offensively haven't been prevented, pretended. Our founders community left for us, declassified for us as nature demonstrates. We're supposed to explain and understand why and how the breaching method only allowed overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists to be juxtaposed with the interbranch individually grouped and together or used remotely. Criminally foreign influence, tactical illusions wrought at countries A through Z, and how they were groupings. Any grouping trying to counter what this breaching method caused and keeps, it is sensed right through their own by the hyperforeign, and that is adapted to. It is why and how the suburbs are clearer than day. And we have the evidence about it. They were designed, we have enough evidence to observe how they were designed tactically to nature, to force negative value nature to demonstrate with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. And more needs for systems tactical ulterior from natures with the syntax and appreciation of positive and negative in its identity and all the identity. Our syntax, this is all about relativity / hyperrelativity. We have black pupils, whites of eyes. They're the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. Therefore, there is relativity. Let alone there is an identity of value progression that is generating a whole bunch of different individual species bodies made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. So we could discern it's not one of those, but is all things anyway. And it is that which is demonstrating three distinct identities of relationship to itself are inseparable not only from all things, but from the parts of those things individually, grouped, and are active and simultaneous / hypersimultaneous. And the only thing that's hypersimultaneous, and the only reason everything can't help but be simultaneous to an extent, is because everything is a part of this one identity of value / value progression system that the Constitution was forced to begin a bridge from, and all rules and sense and sensibilities, use Jane Austen's phrase, sensing for a breaching method as tools, not even fathoming how a hyperforeign could easily keep the measure and maintain complete possession / hyperpossession of the syntax of the names A through Z at locations, areas, and states. Only known, only remembered through an as systems tactical ulterior. Again, from that one, that is nature itself projecting to us. Relativity / hyperrelativity. No theory here. Each nature of debate, this breaching method is all offensively propagated to have self-cultivated roles, to have needs, natures, and styles, and methods, plural, collusion slash, that's with its method. There was a hyper singular method that had other countries and overt criminal enterprises, private ones, involved even with slavery against our own black people's rights of eyes, northern colonies and southern colonies entrenched, and rolled with it, and then America's founders were born. And no one had free speech. Someone must teach. These are people are using the names of the people, the scientists, to use the phrase from the Old Testament. But no, noting that's after the part the part with the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life. Oh no, this is not after that. The part that says the names. There's a part in the Old Testament that says only defend right here, and it's not about faith. It's semi-faith. It doesn't have to be. But in other words, it says only defend right here where the names of the people, the sciences will come together. In the part that comes before it. Part of the reason it's science is relative to where people are appreciating and are defending the religious books out of sequence. It's also the Quran has a part right up front that says all that matters is if an individual is going to be honest. Are they going to use the name Allah per science to refer to that which is hyper invisible but still discernible? So to speak, my translation, the translation of an English translation of the Quran. But it says all that matters if someone's honest about that name. And it says even if they're not honest, it directs Muslims to love that person anyway. See, there's a breaching method that changed what the sciences were about, and it forced collusions with that. And it forced that sustained, specifically to hide behind and through, nature's demonstrations of that by making more roles with it, even though no one wanted it. And everyone's going to speak about their motivations, and that screams the breaching method. A breaching method motivates you. If you heard or brought up how we have black people's rights of eyes, or how we could discern a human fact should be nature breaching method, is one of the things that was true always what those laws were about, that were entrenched, rolls with it too, before America's founders were born, and international maintenance and conversations about it, and investigations for it, used to measure and maintain everyone's an extent of collusion slash us against themselves and against everyone else around them, or themselves sensing for the breaching method, anyone not. Everyone at an extent of no free speech but pretending other. To an extent, they had to pretend they had free speech even though they know they didn't, and make subject treatments anyway. Otherwise, that body would be sensed and would be adapted to by the breaching method in sick ways they didn't, right, juxtaposed ways they didn't discern at the same time. Including that body was a majority of people, including it was everyone from a whole country together. This breaching method came from before modern religious messengers, already having played the people that could only operate names A through Z as countries' names, to start fighting with each other and to blame other things, others ourselves, for things that a hyper additional name started, is causing and keeps. There are proofs that a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise had roles in the World Trade Center attack. It's recorded. Wethersfield police have a bunch of people named Scalora and others that were at the World Trade Center attack, including as victims and their families and neighbors of their families. Also involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and with their neighbors with various natures of body dumping spots, and child abusers, leaders of kids years apart for forced, falsified transcripts and police databases with the same people. We don't have a one side defended the way nature shows it. And the breaching method keeps fights. So it could keep what is recorded, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw fact, human nature, quality aspects of nature, inherent to, active to, and progressive to. The nature of debates, the styles of it, only allowed to be heard, or that body is sensed. How they're getting away with it is what I caught them doing, but you guys have to respond. We are only allowed to speak for the law by ourselves. And it is also evidences how they've been pretending people don't want to speak with the police that already offensively pretended me to fake conversations with them as a kid, now as an adult, fake ties to me as people, and a whole bunch of it at once. Put all intercities, they did this. Same ones involved in interstates and internationally. Wethersfield police have roles increasingly forcing Saudis to collusions with them and with the ones that were interstate. My Saudi friend wasn't with me the night before the World Trade Center attack. And when I was an observer in the Ninth Circuit Court right next to the World Trade Center towers right before the attack, I know for a fact, before and after it too, FBI Director Robert Lusk and his co-defendants, their family members, people involved with relative depositions, all sides of criminal and civil cases interstates, and the courts and the intelligence tied to them at the same time, off the corrections offices and judicial branch offices. There are families with campuses that act tied to others from off the campuses, stacking predicate acts with facts, wire mail crime acts and methods, abuses of each age and nature, factual nature. These are people that are changing and faking our short words. I shouldn't have to beg you so many times to get WFSB to get me out fake conversations with them and with others and get me a response for what I caught them doing with the campuses. They had other natures of methods of organized crimes and names involved with all these people at the same time that faked ties to me, mixed with the ones who changed the ties and nature ties to me and timing of it roles hit a way worse. These courts already recorded themselves with the state judicial branch office, corrections offices, collusions with crime methods, organized crime acts, way worse than the little kids they put in jail even. And with the people running the jails. They're increasingly involved with the World Trade Center attack. In other words, the jails too, increasingly with their patients and criminals. And before they got caught and after, hiding life progressions, all kinds of medicines, crimes, and delusions too, with psychiatry. We're going to examine how the principles of American history you guys have replaced with his principle. That and how and why the only founder we know the name of is James Madison. And his plan. Then they went to George Washington. And his roles with them in that might to counter extort at key locations inside of more than 13 colonies in such a way to fight with everyone at once, but to make everyone, because everyone else was tortured, including the other countries. It wasn't just England that had slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. And themselves, they were fact, cheap nature enslaved, therefore physically. They still are. They don't remember the history of English. We are in a semi-ancient trap that measures and maintains the operators of names A through Z as countries, the voicings for humanity, through an as systems totalitarian from what could defend that and afford to be, let alone to protract. Short words proper, using relativity / hyperrelativity. There is relativity because it is not us, is not the other species bodies generating a whole bunch of different individual species bodies of a whole bunch of individual bodies. And ours with the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time and exceptions. We're also showing us a special difference, the nature of debate regarding it. So they are all natures of debate. They contain quality aspects of nature, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, or revolutions, would have been revealed. You guys make me read the nature shows part of this. Hyper intelligence programming that is capable of being but you guys can't afford to have lists followed. And you guys, it's against the law for you guys to fish and to change and fake what people say. But you guys do that. And then you go fishing to see, in other words, fix the fake news. The FBI Director Robert Luskin has a whole bunch of people at and next to Connecticut news networks that are involved with people with a map uses, like from Old Weathersfield, founding locations and conjunctions to them and to that, like all along Route 175 and corners of that street are people involved with predicate acts with Weathersfield police since I was a kid. And this is on recorded, but then they're also recorded trying to fake things recorded to hide that. They have other police departments, their family members, retired police chiefs, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the adults in their families, the kids, even if they're fake. You know, I mean, even if they're intelligence and they're just directed to pretend they're criminal enterprises. They have time collusion /S with the interbranch forging and switching names and the news at the same time, refusing to get on paper, already faking transcripts at those locations. You know, there's an aside syndrome. There are collusions that never went away from that original collusion. There's an original collusion that you guys have self-value roles with and or role sensing and or that's how you're sensed. The rest of humanity who tried to speak about this, and a lot of people tried to start a conversation by saying, well, you know how slavery is unnatural. Then someone will jump in, or they'll hear people in the news media and the media saying, well, if things weren't natural, they wouldn't be. Experts were, I'm not even a lawyer, experts of the law are obligated by nature itself to explain and to observe how nature itself demonstrates some things are only natural as criminal insidiousness nature. Nature has a nature and has relativity to a special difference. We could discern its identity of value progression to an extent, but that extent comes also with its complete identity relation to itself, and the only increasing value of that here, or it is forced away from here, as forced space nature transfer, as a special difference transfer. Please make sure you get them on paper into branch. The Britain Superior Court has a bunch of people involved with Route 175, which is also called Wells Road in Weathersfield. But it goes through Newington and all the way to Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, and names on all sides of that. Have rules with Connecticut's District Court, the Hartford Courts, and the Britain Superior Court, with names that confess things. I found out too, it's about their collusions with former Director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, and names on all sides of criminal and civil cases and depositions, and their family members and their neighbors and neighbors of their family members have time collusions on off campuses by identity theft, fraud, slanders, acting as collusions with the predicate acts with the databases relative, and the wire crime acts and methods relative, and the names that and the difference of the guilt at the network's locations or next to them, or with that, or as their roles, or the people with the public television. Increasingly, all these other countries they're hiding behind, and they're doing the same thing there because they have uncharged criminal enterprises. They have natures of integrity that are incapable of defending themselves and affording the hyper evidential, the hyper archaeological from being voiced relative to where and to how and to why. Let me try to get an example of it's in one of these videos here. Here's a lady with a Russian house that looks just like American houses. And these designs were made before our founders were born. And right through our country's foundings, there was a breaching method entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies with slavery. And our founders that we don't know the names of and James Madison, the one we do. They didn't have free speech during their lifetime because of those crazy laws against every difference and measured and maintained. Everyone hurt each other. An extent of collusion to keep only natures of unity, only natures of independence, and definite defenses of that sensibilities like that, sensing for the hyperform. In other words. So here's I'm gonna put this is the link to proof in Russia, in America, from America to Russia, Ukraine. The suburbs were designed tactically to nature to force people onto systems tactical ulterior from nature's. Hyper additionally from the ways they all know that, and we all know we are. But everyone only discerns and blames it on the hyper additional, exactly the way the breaching method wants and needs. Because nature itself is showing us. Let alone our founders did too, but while their communications are replaced, even though they're known, using what presidents and people said, leaving out what our founders communicated, which is that what everyone said was measured and maintained. No one had free speech. Everyone had to pretend other to an extent, otherwise be sentenced, not collusion /s, and punished for that, including if they were a majority of people, including if they were everybody. We don't have time for them to take a long time to teach things about these folks. This is what bad. This is what happened. So in other words, vaccines, please get them to fix the World Trade Center predicate acts. The same names are involved with child abusers, leaders, and kids in the past and further. So make sure I get a response for what I recorded them involved with, the principal child abuser. And Whiting Forensics increasingly has a bunch of people like a Joshua Julian and people named O'Neill involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids. Like a Bob Chase is involved with falsified police reports with a Phil Collo involved with such, and with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, even if they are intelligence families positioned to look like that. Get them off the fake conversations with me.